Hey there, it's Katie Jarvis with Managing the Mess. If we haven't met before, I'm a K-6 elementary art teacher, and I work at a Title I school just outside of Washington, D.C. In this video, I'm going to go over routines that you want to teach in your art room in those first few weeks of school. The first routine you're going to want to teach your students is how to enter the art room. So what I've done this year is I have printed out a picture of what my carpet looks like, but also my expectations. So I'm going to greet my students in the hallway and do kind of a little mini lesson on what does it look like to come into the art room. I'm going to explain that they are going to walk in and stay standing in their line order until they get to the front of the carpet. The first person is going to sit down on the first circle. And then once they're sitting down, the second person will sit down on the second circle. I'm going to show them these expectations and explain that they will stay in their line order. There should be no sounds. There should not be sounds from people's hands clapping or their feet stomping or their voices talking. They will sit down on the carpet, and once they're sitting, their eyes should be forward and their ears should be listening. Once I've gone through this in the hallway quickly, I will bring the students in and let them practice this on my carpet. The next routine you're going to want to teach is a signal that means the class is going to begin, because there might be a bit of a pause once students are seated. You might be dealing with students from the previous class. You might need to help a student as they're coming in with another issue. You might be having a conversation with an adult in the hallway. So when you're really ready to begin, I recommend having a signal that students know means go, action. This is when the class starts. So for me, I have a little clap. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. Don't hit clap. And that clap means that you turn your voice off and put your eyes on me. Next, I would go over expectations of how students would be able to sit on the carpet. And there are variations of this, and usually like some freebies on Teachers Pay Teachers of these little sitting style posters. And I will link a few free ones down below in the video description. The first way that they can sit is mountain style with both of their legs pulled up. Second is pretzel style, what's often known as crisscross applesauce, or mermaid style with their legs to the side. I have a song that I use with this daily. It's called the Crisscross Applesauce song, and it's by Harry Wong Kindergarten. You can find it on YouTube. My routines that I use every day are in a separate video called Do You Know How to Start Art? It's my most popular video. If you haven't checked it out, you're going to want to definitely watch that video next. Lots of great ideas. Next, I teach my students a greeting that we use each and every week, and I got this from Cassie Stevens. I teach the students that I will say, hello, my most amazing artist, and they will respond, hello, my most amazing art teacher. We practice this once or twice, and then this is something, again, that we would use each and every week. The next routine I like to teach is my quiet signal for my lessons. So I will change my sign from yellow zone, meaning that students are allowed to talk quietly, to the red zone. And in a red zone, what that means is that only if the teacher is talking, if a student wants to make a comment, they need to raise their hand up and wait to be called on. When we go back to our seats, we will change the sign to the yellow zone, and you will be able to talk quietly. When we are in our lesson on the carpet, the sign will be in the red zone. Just like when mom and dad are driving the car, red means stop, and be sure to raise your hand. I teach my students that when I change the sign to the red zone, that means a time for Mona Lisa listening. So I go through and explain, of course, that the Mona Lisa is one of the most famous paintings in the entire world of a person. And we look at what the painting looks like. We say that eyes should be on Mrs. Jarvis, hands should be still, and lips should be zipped, or mouths should be closed. And they get a chance to practice what good listening looks like. I love this because it gives a very clear definition of what is expected. This is, of course, an expectation that I'm going to revisit and go over at the very beginning of class each and every week. I do the call and response where I say Mona, they say Lisa. Mona, Lisa, Mona, Lisa. And then we check that hands are still, eyes are forward, and lips are zipped. The next routine is for the good of the order. I put in a slide there to remind me to set my timer. And I use this little time timer, a visual timer. If you're interested in getting this, I will put a link in the description, but the students can see the time that is in red. I set that for our work and lesson time. And then once they hear the timer go off, that is when our cleanup begins. During the lesson, my students know because of that red zone that they need to be quiet and listening, showing that Mona Lisa listening. But you want to teach your students what quiet signals you're going to use throughout the class. And I have two that I often use. One is this class yes response. So this is from whole brain teaching, and it's just simply I say class and the class responds yes. So I give them some examples. What would you do if I said class, class? They would say yes, yes. What would you do if I said class, class, class? And they get to respond yes, yes, yes. We try some other ones, see if I can kind of stump them. Classity class, and they would respond yesity yes. After I'm done teaching that, I explain my bell and chime system. So I have a little tiny desk bell. I have this one, so I have one like on one side of my room, and I have a really fun art teacher-esque rainbow one that I'll link in the description down below. And I use these if I ring the bell in the middle of class, the students are to stop, look, and listen. In the younger grades, whether I use the bell or the chime, I ask them to put their hands up and their eyes up. You need to be careful with this one because often kindergarten teachers that are really great at training the students will have them put their hands on top of their head. If you're doing paint or clay or anything messy and sticky, this is not going to go well. So you want to make sure you teach the routine in your class that just hands go up and eyes go up for those younger students. For my older students, again, I just allow them to stop, look, and listen. And you're going to want to practice this a few times during that first day. The first week of school, I show my students a video of my rules and expectations. And what it is a video of me acting like a student. And sometimes I'm showing a student that's doing things the right way. And sometimes I'm showing the opposite of what we would do. Now, I have this in a separate video, how to teach the art room rules, that you're going to want to make sure that you watch. I also at this time go through my rules with the students and have them recite the rules because this is a routine that we will use each and every class. I have hand motions that I do along with my rules. So this is a time when I would model them and show them what each one was, and then have them try that out. This is all in a separate video again that I mentioned. Do you know how to start art? If you're more curious about that, make sure you take a peek at that one next. You'll want to share with your students what happens if the class does or does not follow the rules. For me, I keep track of all my classes on this little chart that I have hanging up, and I give out a gold and silver paintbrush award. I have a video that goes into more detail about my behavior management, but it's something that I teach my students from this very first day of art. Those first few weeks, you're going to be establishing with your students that they need to work quietly, but you also need to decide what are you going to do when that doesn't happen. So for me, I give 1-2 warnings about the noise level, and on that third warning, we will have 5 minutes of silent art. So I use this digital timer to put up 5 minutes and students are to work silently. If that does not happen, we add a minute if someone is still talking. You'll want to briefly also talk about what happens if an individual student is not following the rules. So I do a system that's called 1, 2, 3 magic. The first thing I would do is give a student a warning when they have broken one of the rules. The second warning, I would let the classroom teacher know. I have a little communication slip of paper that I use. I actually sell this on Teachers Pay Teachers. If you're interested in something like that, it's a communication piece so that the teacher knows what happened during art and then what I, as the art teacher, had done about that behavior. After the second warning, if I have to speak to a student again about the same rule, then they would need to take a break. And I have a little take a break spot in my room. At that point, not only is their name on the note that I am sharing with the teacher, but I'm going to reach out to their family. You know, Talking Points is an app that my school uses that directly texts the parents, or I would send an email, or I would call. I do let my students make something on that very first day of art. And as they're working, I allow them to talk quietly. But we talk about what is okay to talk about. So they are allowed to talk if they're teaching somebody else what to do or reminding someone else about directions. They can talk about anything art related. They can talk about their learning. They can share something. Hey, this is working for me. Do you want to try this out on yours? And they can give any kind comments and have those kind conversations with other students. What they're not allowed to talk about are things that just have nothing to do with art. Now, what I decided to do was give an example, and the example that I gave the first time I started explaining this to my students was chicken nuggets. Like, you can always think if there's a kid, at the table that says, hey, raise your hand if you like chicken nuggets, and everybody stops working, they raise their hands in the air because who doesn't like chicken nuggets, right? So that has nothing to do with art. And the students laughed and they really liked that example. So from that point on, I just started referring to it as chicken nugget talk. And having that name for it, the students would help me kind of shut this down with other students when things were just kind of getting inappropriate or people were getting too distracted by their conversation. That's what we call talking about chicken nuggets. That first day, you're going to want to go over what your procedures are for the restroom. Now, my restrooms are located quite a little walk from the art room, so I like to have my students go before or after art, and that's probably also ideal for you. So what I would also do is I would email the classroom teachers maybe a week or two into school once they really have established their routine and ask them, does the class take a group restroom break before art? Do they take one right after art? Because it's likely one or the other. Knowing this information, you could tell students, hey, there's only 5 minutes till your class takes the bathroom break. Can you make it until that break so that they are not leaving your class? If they are leaving your class, this is when you want to share, do they need to take a buddy? Do they need to take a bathroom pass? I do passes that I have hanging on a little magnetic hook by my door, and they're painted pink and blue, and students can take any one that they like and take that when they go to the restroom. This is a signal for other teachers, especially for those little kindergartners and first graders, why they're in the hallway, especially if they're wandering around and they can't quite find their way back to the art room. For the older kids, if they are running or misbehaving, then another teacher can bring them back to me, knowing where they were coming from. Those first few weeks of school, you're probably required to go over some safety drill items. So be sure that you're touching on what do students do in a fire drill. Also tell them what you're doing. You might be lining up the students and you need to be the line leader and lead them out. You also want to share what to do for a lockdown drill. And you might be introducing this before the classroom teacher has gotten to this item for back to school information. So make sure that you give examples of other reasons that there could be a lockdown drill besides worst case scenarios. Explain that there might be a bank that got robbed, a couple miles from the school. I've had situations where maybe a kindergartner was missing, and that was the fastest way to locate that student in the building. Also, once we had the recess door open as kids were coming in and out, and a neighborhood dog, just a happy little dog, came into the school and got the crazies. So to get the dog out efficiently and quickly, we did have a little lockdown, had everyone go into their classrooms and remain in there until we got the dog out. So share those things just so that students feel comfortable and it kind of lightens the mood if you were to have those practice drills as to what you're preparing for, because it could be a variety of different things. Keep it very simple those first few weeks of school, limiting the supplies that you're using, because you're going to need to take a lot of time to explain how to use those supplies and how to care for them. So you don't want to get into a full room tour the first week, or you will not have time to make anything. If I was using pencils, I would introduce my students to this area of my room called Pennsylvania. And as you can see, I like to use slides so that everyone can see very easily how my pencils are stored, and I would break down and explain the organization behind it. I would explain my pencil hospital that we use for broken pencils and when students should put those pencils in there. If you're using a material such as crayons, you could also do it this way. You could have a list of what can they do with that material and what they cannot. I did get this from Teachers Pay Teachers, and I will link it down below. But many sellers that sell for kindergarten, they have these kind of charts, and they could be very helpful to us art teachers. the first day that you start making things, you're going to need to give your students a signal for when they need to stop working, look at you, and listen to cleanup directions. So I teach my students that when I say macaroni and cheese, they say everybody freeze, and then nobody is walking or talking. And then I give them directions about what they need to do next. I teach them this full routine the very first day about what I will be doing and saying and what they will be doing and saying. I have this in a separate video, this routine. It's called How to Avoid Cleanup Chaos. Any cleanup tools that you are going to be using for cleaning up that first day, you're going to want to introduce to the students at the beginning of the class. This way, later on when you're giving those cleanup directions and you might be rushing, you don't have to explain where you find these things. You're just kind of reminding them. So often my students will use baby wipes for cleaning up or small brooms. I would show pictures and explain where these things are located inside my classroom. You'll want to teach routines specific to your art room of how things are organized and how things run. So for me, I explain to my students about the different colored tables. I explain that they can tell what table they are sitting at by the color on top of the stool. Don't worry, I have a video for that. Have you caught on to the theme here? I have chair socks that are made out of felt. Got a video for that too. And I have a numbering system. So this goes along with my student name tag labels. It keeps me extremely organized. I use this for my helpers. So the helper tables are different colored tables, and I actually choose 2 tables each week to help me. The helpers wear these little job tags. Again, separate video if you want some details, but I would explain this just very briefly that very first day, that this is going to rotate each and every week. And I would model this and show them that, some students are going to be going to pass out the pencils today, and I'd be showing everyone the students are going to be walking back to Pennsylvania. They're going to be getting the pencil cups. They're going to be putting 1 cup on each table. As they're doing it, I'm showing it to everybody. So next week, when it's a different table's turn, they're going to have some kind of frame of reference. Where are those pencils? How do I pass them out? How does that all look? I use these numbers also for lining up. So I have these awesome vinyl line spots, and I'll dismiss 1 table at a time and have them go stand in line order. Guess what? I have a whole video about lining up. I totally love classroom management and art room routines if you haven't noticed that yet. And I love making videos for our teachers just like you to help you feel less alone in this crazy career. Here's the video that I hope you'll watch next.